At approximately 6 a.m. on March 14, 2026, the amphibious assault ship USS Tripoli departed its home port in Japan. Aboard her, 2,200 Marines of the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, the Indo-Pacific's Rapid Response Force, pulled from its normal theater and redirected 4,000 miles southwest toward a 21-mile-wide choke point that is currently strangling 20% of the world's oil supply. That ship is still moving, it hasn't arrived yet, and while it transits, the Trump administration has doubled down, ordering another 2,500 Marines off the USS Boxer out of San Diego, plus a parallel airlift operation routing additional forces into regional staging bases. By the time the full deployment consolidates in theater, roughly 5,000 elite amphibious troops will be positioned within operational range of the Strait of Hormuz. Here is what I need you to understand before I walk you through the deployment, the mission options, and the financial architecture underneath all of it. A recent Internal Defense Intelligence Agency assessment circulating inside the Pentagon concluded that Iran could potentially keep the strait shut for anywhere from 1 to 6 months. 1 to 6 months. That range, from a manageable disruption to an economy-altering catastrophe, is the precise uncertainty that 5,000 Marines and a $200 billion war funding request are being mobilized to resolve. The strait won't open itself, the money won't print itself, and the consequences at your gas station, your grocery store, and your variable rate debt obligations won't wait for a diplomatic solution that nobody has yet defined. Let me show you the full picture. Why the strait is the war's decisive terrain. The Strait of Hormuz is 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. Through it, historically, passed approximately 138 commercial vessels per day, tankers, cargo ships, LNG carriers, representing roughly 20% of the world's oil and a significant share of global liquefied natural gas. According to Lloyd's List Intelligence, just 77 ships crossed the strait in the first 3 weeks of March 2026, compared to 1,229 during the same period last year. That is a 94% collapse in traffic through the world's most critical energy corridor. The IRGC has been transmitting warnings via VHF radio to vessels in the strait, stating that no ship is allowed to pass the Strait of Hormuz. On March 4th, the IRGC claimed the Islamic Republic of Iran Navy had achieved complete control of the strait. Iran has backed that claim with action. At least 16 merchant vessels have been attacked in the Strait of Hormuz and its adjoining waters since February 28th, killing 8 seafarers, with 1 still missing. A Thai bulk carrier, the Mayuri Nari, was fired upon and set ablaze. A Liberian-flagged vessel, the Express Rome, was struck by Iranian projectiles. These are not warning shots, they are operational proof of control. Iran is masterful at asymmetric warfare and has been planning for this for decades, with a geographic gift in the Strait of Hormuz, according to retired Army Brigadier General John Campbell. The geography is the key constraint. The strait is bordered by Iran to the north, which means Iranian fast attack boats, coastal missile batteries, submarine assets, drone swarms, and mining capability all operate from sovereign territory within direct engagement range of any ship attempting to pass. You cannot simply escort a tanker through a waterway when the shore to your north is capable of firing a Mach 2.5 anti-ship missile from a beach fortification that looks like a civilian building. The Marines. What they are, what they can do. The 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit is not a standard infantry force. It is a 2,200-person combined arms rapid response package built around an infantry battalion but supported by artillery, armoured vehicles, MV-22B Osprey Tiltrotor aircraft, AH-1Z Viper attack helicopters, and CH-53E heavy lift helicopters. It deploys aboard an amphibious ready group, an assault ship, 2 transport docks, and a support vessel, giving it the ability to operate entirely from the sea while projecting land combat power ashore within hours of a command decision. The formation can launch aircraft, landing craft, and small boats to conduct evacuations, maritime security missions, raids, and other limited combat operations. Officials said positioning the Marines offshore would allow commanders to respond quickly to threats against commercial vessels, diplomatic facilities, or civilians in the region. The deployment also signals something strategically beyond the immediate mission. The 31st MEU normally operates in the Western Pacific from bases in Okinawa, Japan, and deploys across the Indo-Pacific region. Sending the unit toward the Middle East temporarily reduces Marine amphibious presence in that theater, which means the Pentagon made a deliberate calculation that the Hormuz situation outweighs, at this moment, the deterrence value of maintaining full Indo-Pacific posture. That is a statement about strategic priorities that Beijing, Taiwan, and every defense ministry in Asia is reading carefully right now. Now here are the 3 mission scenarios that military analysts and former CENTCOM officials are actively debating, because the deployment gives commanders options they didn't have before, and each option carries radically different cost and risk profiles. Mission Option 1: Maritime Escort and Corridor Security. The most politically manageable option is a naval escort framework. U.S. warships and amphibious assets providing armed convoy protection for commercial tankers attempting to transit the strait. Trump said on Friday that the strait can open with a simple military maneuver and suggested Navy escorts would happen soon. Some former military officials are confident that American ships, aircraft, and drones alone will be enough to protect tankers transiting the strait, while others say ground troops would need to seize control of miles of Iranian coastline to truly secure it. The distinction matters enormously for the price tag and the risk of American casualties. On March 19th, General Dan Kane announced that the U.S. was deploying A-10 Thunderbolt II jets to strike Iranian fast-attack watercraft and AH-64 Apache gunships to handle one-way attack drones. CENTCOM published footage showing U.S. strikes destroying Iranian naval assets threatening international shipping in and near the strait. That is the air and naval version of corridor security, constantly attriting the Iranian capability to threaten shipping without physically seizing any territory. The A-10 specifically is designed for exactly this threat profile: slow, low, heavily armored, with a 30mm cannon capable of destroying small fast attack boats before they reach a tanker's standoff zone. On March 17th, CENTCOM announced it employed multiple GBU-72 5,000-pound penetrator munitions on underground missile silos along the Iranian coast near the strait, penetrating layers of rock and concrete to destroy underground bunkers storing Iran's cruise missiles and anti-ship missiles. Destroying the stored munitions before they can be launched is the asymmetric solution to the asymmetric threat. You don't intercept every Iranian anti-ship missile if you can destroy the magazine it was stored in, but ship captains waiting to cross the strait have not heard any specific plans from the US military. The commercial shipping community, the people who actually have to sail through this, are operating on uncertainty, not a clear plan. That uncertainty is itself an economic cost, a maritime expert in contact with those ship captains told reporters. They just want security. They are not hearing from the military. Mission Option 2: Island Seizure. Marine analysts say the most likely mission for the deployed MEU is helping reopen the strait, perhaps by seizing small islands near the shipping lanes and setting up air defense systems. The islands in question, Abu Musa, Greater Tumb, and Lesser Tumb, sit directly in the shipping lane. Iran has occupied them since 1971 and has been using them as forward operating positions for drone launches and fast attack boat staging. Seizing one of the small islands could be a major bargaining chip, according to defense analysts, forcing Iran to make concessions on strait access in exchange for its return. This is the limited objectives version of a ground operation, not an invasion of Iran, but a seizure of a strategic asset that Iran values enough to negotiate over. The risk is proportionate to the upside. Iranian military doctrine treats any seizure of its territory as an existential provocation, and the IRGC has pre-planned retaliation scenarios for exactly this contingency. An island seizure would almost certainly trigger an escalatory response from Iran's remaining missile and drone inventory, the same inventory currently being managed carefully across 70-plus waves of Operation True Promise 4. There is also increasing speculation that US forces could be used to seize Karg Island, the facility through which 90% of Iran's oil exports pass. White House officials reportedly believe that taking Karg would totally bankrupt the Revolutionary Guard and could potentially lead to a swift end of the war. But many inside the administration are wary of such a move, particularly given it would require a significant number of ground troops. Francis Galgano, a military geography specialist at Villanova University, estimated 5,000 troops just to take and hold Karg Island under fire. The entire currently deploying force, exactly that number. Mission Option 3: Uranium Security. Trump administration officials have also discussed the possibility of deploying US forces to secure Iran's stocks of highly enriched uranium. This is the option that nobody is talking about publicly, but everybody is planning for privately. If the air campaign has degraded Iran's command and control infrastructure sufficiently, the question of what happens to approximately 60 kilograms of 90% enriched uranium, enough for a nuclear device, becomes the most dangerous single variable in the entire conflict. A senior White House official told Reuters that Trump has various options for acquiring Iran's nuclear material, but has not decided how to proceed. Special Operations Forces conducting a nuclear material seizure operation is not a scenario drawn from fiction. It has been planned, rehearsed, and kept in reserve by U.S. Special Operations Command for decades. The question is whether the air campaign has degraded Iran's ability to move or protect that material to a threshold where the operation is executable. That threshold is classified, but the Marines now offshore provide the rapid exploitation capability that such an operation would require. The financial architecture of the deployment. Now let me follow the money, because the deployment itself is not the only financial story. It is the military expression of an economic emergency that is already hitting every household in the country. Brent crude settled at $112.19 a barrel on Friday, its highest level so far in the war. Goldman Sachs has suggested that higher prices could last all the way through 2027. Trump administration officials now privately estimate that higher prices triggered by the war could linger for months, especially as fighting intensifies and straight transit remains nearly impossible. In response to that crisis, the administration made a move this week that captures the full paradox of this conflict. It temporarily lifted sanctions on 140 million barrels of Iranian oil, already loaded on tankers, valid until April 19th. The United States is at war with Iran, while simultaneously lifting sanctions on Iranian oil to manage the economic consequences of being at war with Iran. That is not an editorial characterization. That is the operational reality as of this morning. The gas station arithmetic. In just the first week after Trump bombed Iran, the average price of gasoline in the United States increased 48 cents per gallon. The national average is now approaching $4 per gallon, above $5 in California. Two-car household standard commute, approximately $140 to $160 per month in fuel costs that did not exist on February 27th. The grocery impact from disrupted fertilizer supply arrives in May. Goldman Sachs says the energy environment persists through 2027. The math is not improving. Trump may seek up to $200 billion in new Pentagon funding to keep the war running. $200 billion. The administration has already spent an estimated $33 billion across 22 days of operations. The $200 billion supplemental request would bring the authorized total to roughly $233 billion deployed into a federal budget already running structural deficits in an economy that shed 92,000 jobs in February, with the Fed priced out of rate cuts by conflict-driven inflation. The chain from the Strait of Hormuz to your mortgage payment is not a theoretical risk. It is the current operating environment. As an economist put it plainly this week, high oil prices are not good for mortgage rates. Who benefits from the deployment? The contractors who equip the Marines, maintain the amphibious assets, and supply the munitions are already positioned. RTX holds the Tomahawk contract. Lockheed holds the F-35 and THAAD contracts. Huntington Ingalls built and services the USS Tripoli. The deployment does not create new contracts. It activates existing options at accelerated timelines. Defense sector ETFs have outperformed the S&P 500 by 16 to 18 percentage points since the conflict opened. Goldman Sachs is projecting elevated oil prices through 2027 on the same week it is advising clients on defense sector positioning. The Allied vacuum and what it costs. Trump called NATO allies cowards for not helping the US secure the Strait of Hormuz. Several US-aligned NATO countries rejected Trump's request for warship escorts, including Germany, Spain, Italy, Estonia, the United Kingdom, Australia, South Korea, and Japan, as well as the European Union. The Allied refusal is not just a diplomatic embarrassment, it is a direct financial cost. Every nation that benefits from straight traffic, China, Japan, South Korea, India, the EU, is currently receiving the economic benefit of American naval action without contributing to its cost. Japan's economy receives approximately 90% of its oil through the strait. South Korea is similarly dependent. They are watching the US deploy 5,000 Marines, spend $200 billion, and absorb the domestic political cost of a war that 56% of Americans oppose, and sending diplomatic notes expressing concern. The UAE declared its willingness to join a US-led military effort to secure the strait on March 18th, making it one of the only allies to publicly commit to any operational role. That commitment is not accidental. The UAE has been absorbing Iranian drone attacks on its ports and infrastructure directly, and its economic calculus for participation is straightforward. If the strait stays closed, the UAE's economy contracts severely. The self-interest alignment is transparent. China's position is the most consequential gap. Beijing buys more Iranian oil than any other country. Iran's conditional offer to partially reopen the strait in exchange for yuan-denominated oil trade was a direct overture to Chinese economic interests. Trump's postponed Xi summit is the diplomatic variable that determines whether a Chinese-backed partial opening becomes possible, or whether Beijing continues watching the US absorb the cost of a conflict that disrupts a strait. Beijing also depends on, while quietly benefiting from a yuan for oil arrangement that erodes dollar dominance in global energy pricing. 3 paths from the deployment scenario. 1. The corridor opens under military pressure. The combination of GBU-72 penetrator strikes on underground coastal missile silos, A-10 operations against fast attack boat staging areas, Apache counter-drone operations, and the offshore presence of 5,000 Marines creates sufficient deterrence that commercial shipping resumes under armed escort. Iran does not contest the corridor aggressively enough to cause major losses. Tanker traffic climbs from 5 ships per day back toward 50 or 60, not the pre-war 138, but enough to begin unwinding the supply disruption premium. Brent crude retreats from $112 toward $90. The IEA's emergency release begins to have price effect. The key indicator, watch Lloyd's List Intelligence daily strait transit data. Any week-over-week increase in commercial transits is the earliest signal this scenario is materializing. Scenario 2. Island seizure. Escalatory response. Marines conduct an amphibious seizure of one of the Iranian-held islands in the shipping lane, Abu Musa, or one of the Tunbs. Iran responds with its remaining missile inventory, escalating the strait conflict from an interdiction campaign to a direct territorial confrontation. US casualties mount. The Iranians have real leverage with this, and there's not an obvious fix, an intelligence official told CNN. Congress, already being asked for $200 billion, faces a second emergency supplemental before the first one clears. The key indicator, any White House statement referencing seizure or control of named islands in the strait. Trump has demonstrated a pattern of announcing major escalations publicly before they execute. Watch Truth Social. Scenario 3. The DIA's 6-month timeline. The DIA assessment that Iran could keep the strait shut for 1 to 6 months reflects the possibility that none of the military options, corridor security, island seizure, coastal bombardment, is sufficient to fully reopen traffic against a determined Iranian resistance operating from sovereign territory. The Marines are offshore. The air campaign continues. But 5 ships per day becomes the new normal for weeks. Goldman Sachs's 2027 price projection is not a tail risk, it is the base case. The Fed remains paralyzed. The grocery shock lands in May. The $200 billion supplemental passes with domestic program offsets that arrive quietly as line item cuts in HUD, SNAP, and public health preparedness. The key indicator, a second DIA assessment leaked to the press updating the 1 to 6 month range. If the range narrows towards 6 months, the market will price it overnight. What to watch. The USS Tripoli's arrival date. The 31st MEU is approximately 2 to 3 weeks from consolidating in theater from Japan. The USS Boxer from San Diego takes longer, roughly 3 to 4 weeks. The moment both ARGs are in theater simultaneously, the operational options available to CENTCOM expand materially. Watch for any CENTCOM announcement of full amphibious capability in theater. That is the phrase that signals the deployment has reached its operational threshold. The tanker escort announcement. Trump said Navy escorts through the strait would happen soon. US officials have been working furiously to stand up a tanker escort framework, privately acknowledging it is a problem without a clear solution. The moment CENTCOM publicly announces a convoy schedule, specific vessels, specific escort assets, specific transit windows, the market will react. Watch crude futures within 24 hours of that announcement. The DIA's 1 to 6 month range. That range is currently the most important single intelligence assessment in global energy markets. Any leak, congressional testimony, or public official statement that narrows or widens it moves oil prices immediately. Monitor the Senate Armed Services Committee hearing schedule. Intelligence officials are being called to testify, and their unguarded language under oath will tell you more than any press briefing. The April 19th sanctions waiver expiration. The Trump administration lifted sanctions on 140 million barrels of Iranian oil currently loaded on tankers, valid until April 19th. 4 weeks from now, that waiver expires. If the strait is still closed on April 19th, the administration faces a binary choice: extend the waiver and acknowledge it is selling Iranian oil to fight a war against Iran, or let it expire and absorb another crude price spike into an already stressed consumer environment. Watch for any Treasury Department announcement in the week of April 12th. The language around waiver extension will tell you exactly what the administration privately believes about the conflict's timeline. And watch the Marines themselves. Even without direct combat in Iran, 13 US troops have been killed and approximately 200 wounded so far. An MEU operating in the confined waters of the Strait under Iranian anti-ship missile threat is operating in one of the most dangerous maritime environments on Earth. The moment any US amphibious asset takes a confirmed hit from Iranian fire, the political calculus in Washington shifts in ways that no Truth Social post can manage. 5,000 elite troops, 3 weeks of air and naval operations, Brent crude at $112, and Goldman Sachs saying 2027. A DIA assessment saying 1 to 6 months. NATO called cowards. The Strait at 5 ships per day instead of 138. One of the core conundrums of this conflict, an intelligence official told CNN, is the Iranians have real leverage with this, and there's not an obvious fix for it. That sentence is not an anonymous leak from a nervous bureaucrat. That is the United States government's internal assessment of its own strategic position 3 weeks into the largest military operation it has launched in the Middle East since Iraq. The fix is not obvious. The Marines are moving, the clock is running, and the Strait of Hormuz is still closed. That is what I needed you to understand today. Know the options, watch the indicators, and check your exposure.